The evening of October 25, 1970, while the city was dozing, something vile was going on in the room of Nancy Marie Benalik's loft in Sacramento, California. When Nancy neglected to show up work the following day, a collaborator requested that her child pay special attention to her in the condo, so he went there and persuaded the condo chief to open the entryway of Nancy's condo. When the two of them went inside, they saw Nancy Marie's dead body shrouded in blood. What detestable foreshadowed the loft on that portentous night? Who might have relentlessly killed this honest and splendid young lady? Invite back to Strange Snare, where we shed light on unnoticed cases the nation over. My name is Matt, and today we are taking a gander at the most established cold case tackled in 2022, so we should stroll on the edge of the secret with next to no further ado Sacramento. The state capital of California is an ideal mix of culture. What's more, business situated at the combination of the Sacramento Stream and the American Waterway. This homestead to fork capital holds a respectable populace. The vegetation around Sacramento is a help considering the intensity in California. It is one of the most outstanding spots to reside in the US. Anyway, it wasn't the most secure put for Nancy Benalik on the critical evening of October 25, 1970. The night carried a haze of obscurity into the Benalik family by flipping around their reality. Nancy Marie Benalik was brought into the world on June 13, 1942 in Nevada, California. Around 1970, 28-year-old Nancy was residing with her feline in an apartment building on Arden Way, Ringer Road in Sacramento. Loft number 17 is where Nancy resided, and it was a wonderful second-story condo she was filling in as a court correspondent in the Sacramento Region Court. Now, we don't have a lot of data about Nancy's family, however. She had a sister, Linda, who cherished, revered and spoiled Nancy all the time. The fall of October 1970 was the most joyful time for Nancy. She was cheerfully drawn into her life partner Ferris and Salami, being the central public protector in the Sacramento Local Court, a similar town hall where Nancy worked, was very much gotten comfortable. His life set to wed soon after a month on November 28, 1970. This blissful couple was really getting to know each other during this time. One critical October night, Nancy Benalik and Ferris Salami went out for supper. Subsequent to going through the night together, they got back to Nancy's condo and visited for quite a while. Once Nancy nodded off, Salami chose to go to his own home. The clock showed 11:30 p.m. when Salami left the Ringer Road loft. He left the sliding glass entryway open somewhat so that Nancy's feline could go in and out for the time being. It was Nancy's propensity, which he basically recently followed that evening. Never to him had the idea happened that that was the last time he would see his life partner, yet without a doubt it was the last time that anyone at any point saw Nancy Marie Benalik alive. In the end, associates developed stressed when Nancy didn't go to work on the morning of October 26, 1970. It was not normal for her to not appear with practically no notification ahead of time. Nancy's colleague and companion Joella Moncrief called her child Jack to go to her condo and beware of her. He thumped on the entryway over and over, however nobody addressed. That was when frenzy began and Jack hurried to the structure administrator for help. At first the supervisor was reluctant, yet subsequent to portraying what is happening, Jack had the option to persuade the director to open the entryway of Nancy's loft with a pass key. The chief opened the entryway and the two of them went inside to observe the horrifying scene that they wouldn't forget until the end of their lives. Inside the room of Nancy Benalik's second-story Ringer Road condo, a terrible crime location was hanging tight for Jack and the condo supervisor. As they entered, Nancy was lying dead in her bed, and a pool of her blood ruthlessly cut to death. She had cut injuries all around her body, remembering numerous protective injuries for her arms. She was attacked terribly, to such an extent that her head was almost beheaded. Specialists were cautioned right away and they showed up a couple of moments later. Blood was wherever at the crime location, however no fingerprints were found inside the condo, which demonstrated that the killer had likely worn tape on his fingers to stay away from fingerprints, as gloves were not as effectively accessible during the 1970s. A blood trail was found by the specialists to get from the second story overhang down to the walkway beneath. It didn't end there, it followed the walkway to two other high-rises and finished in the parking garage. Specialists at the time accept that the killer got away from the parking garage in a vehicle. The blood trail demonstrated that the killer most likely supported blade wounds. Nancy's body was taken to the clinical analyst's office for closer review. They had reasoned that Nancy had in excess of 30 cut injuries all around her body. Examiners accept that Nancy was killed between 12 p.m. of the 25th of October and the early long stretches of October 26, 1970. No suspects were at any point recognized, even in the wake of meeting more than 500 individuals in something like a month of the homicide. In spite of the blood proof, there were very few prompts go on. Nancy had no known foes and nobody realized who might have done such mercilessness to her. The rationale was hazy, yet crime location recreation brought up how the suspect got passage into her loft. Specialists accept that the suspect was a dexterous individual who moved up the second-story overhang and went into Nancy's room through the marginally open entryway while she was dozing. Additionally, a ton of guarded injuries were found on Nancy's arms and hands, demonstrating that she gave an amazing battle prior to going down. Maybe that was the way the executioner was harmed during the attack, which made him leave the blood drag along during the 1970s. As innovation was not, however, progressed as it seems to be today, they could decide somebody's blood bunch from the blood left at the crime location, yet with no solid proof and no prompts go working on it. Went cold. Obviously there were a couple of moves initiated consistently, yet families and companions needed to hang tight for a really long time before the homicide was at last settled. During the examination, criminal investigators found a stunning piece of information at prior around the same time when Nancy was killed. One more lady named Judith Hackery was likewise killed in similar region. Investigators found numerous similitudes between them. The two ladies were around a similar age, live only a pretty far from one another, and were prospective hitched for the vast majority years. Investigators accepted there was an association between the two homicides. It was hypothesized that the two ladies were the casualties of the scandalous Zodiac executioner. However, there was never any actual proof to demonstrate it. Tragically, till now, Judith Hickory's homicide stays perplexing. In 2004, a DNA profile was created from the blood gathered from the crime location and was transferred to the state and public CODIS data sets, yet it yielded no coordinates with any wrongdoer's profile. No one could prevent the case from turning cold, despite the fact that while the family was grieving the deficiency of Nancy, 15 years after the fact, in November of 2019, criminal investigators from the Sacramento region Sheriff's Virus Case Group and specialists from the head prosecutor's office sent off a legal hereditary lineage examination utilizing the very innovation that was utilized to distinguish the infamous brilliant state executioner. The DNA profile was transferred on the open-source parentage site to find individuals who could be connected with the suspect, which the criminal investigators in the long run did. It required 3 additional years for an outcome to emerge. Lastly, on July 21, 2022, the killer of 28-year-old Nancy Marie Benalik was recognized as Richard John Davis. Meanwhile, time was elapsing. These beyond 50 years, science was developing. Sacramento region lead prosecutor Anne-Marie Schubert expressed in the media, alluding to the many years old case. Richard John Davis was brought into the world on Walk 22, 1943. At the hour of perpetrating the wrongdoing, he was 27 years of age, and keeping in mind that living in a similar apartment building as Nancy, while Nancy lived in loft number 17, Davis lived in number 23. They were on furthest edges of a pool. Nancy's loft should have been visible across the pool from Davis' condo. In a public interview alluding to the rationale of the homicide, resigned analyst Mickey Lynx said that Richard Davis expected to do what he did that day. He broke into Nancy's loft the evening of the homicide by climbing the gallery. He put covering tape over all of his fingers to hide fingerprints, so deliberation was there. However, nobody could say for sure. Criminal investigators speculated that Richard could have had a pulverize on his neighbor Nancy and killed her in the wake of finding out about her marriage. Schubert was educated that out of the 500 individuals talked with by the sheriff's office in the primary month following the homicide, Davis and his flatmate were likewise present. Anyway, the two of them gave solid justifications to one another. Davis had no earlier convictions with the exception of a driving impaired charge that was presumably the motivation. Behind why there was no DNA match in the Cody's data set at the underlying phases of the examination, Nancy's family had lost trust that this case could at any point be addressed, as did Mr. Salami, Nancy's then life partner. To be sure, following 52 monotonous years, the most seasoned cold case in Sacramento area was at last tackled in 2022. Ferris Salami would never see this hotly anticipated day, as he passed on from leukemia at 84 years old on February 2, 2014. Nancy was always remembered, Schubert shared with journalists. As I told Linda and Tom, she was generally at the first spot on the list at the sheriff's office and our office in the investigative laboratory, thus numerous different people as Nancy's sister Linda Cox and her significant other. Tom Cox paid attention to her discourse while being situated next to her at the public interview. The culprit, Richard Davis, anyway, would escape equity as he passed on November 2, 1997 at 54 years old because of sickness. Because of liquor addiction, Mickey Lynx let the correspondents know that in the event that the executioner was alive, he would have been accused of planned murder. About the chronic executioner dodging equity, Mickey Lynx lamented, expressing, "Unfortunately there won't be any type of legitimate equity yet. Linda and Tom, I trust this brings you, Nancy and your family, some harmony." In a marked proclamation, Linda Cox expressed that she recalls her sister after very nearly 52 years of missing. "My sister, we owe Mickey Connect such a lot of appreciation. How frequently have my better half Tom and I said Nancy would have cherished our farm, every one of our animals and land with huge expanses. We have missed sharing our kids and grandkids a lot more. Sadly, Nancy's family never got to see the one who took their darling's life in the slammer. In spite of the fact that he sidestepped human discipline, we might dare to dream that he had to deal with serious consequences regarding his violations to a higher power." However, in the end, Nancy's family set things right with the conclusion they got. "Do you suppose, notwithstanding legal DNA innovation, would this wrongdoing have at any point been tackled?" Told us in the remarks segment your knowledge into this disastrous case.